Hey docs, let's talk about Smile Suite, because it's not just another scheduling system. It's a game changer in the world of new patient management. And as a proud Smile Suite partner, I've witnessed the incredible impact it has on practices of all sizes. Smile Suite means your new patient calls and web leads are expertly handled 7 days a week, even during nights and weekends. And they offer top-notch customizable presentation software and seamless post-consultation follow-up. It's like having a secret weapon for your practice's success. Curious? Dive into the revolution at GetSmileSuite.com. And don't forget to mention Hey Docs to unlock some extra goodies. Elevate your practice with Smile Suite, because every smile deserves a suite of excellence. Hey, everybody. Doug, I am so excited to have you on the show today. And in the event that somebody just happens to not know who you are or what you do, would you mind taking a few minutes and just talking about that?
Yes, first of all, Jill, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I know you put out so much great content, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be part of it. And yes, as you said, I'm Doug Copple. Our firm name is Bentson Copple Associates. We actually have 3 owners. Chris Bentson is my original partner. Shannon Patterson has become a partner with us over the last several years. And our firm does, we say, valuations, transitions, and recruiting for orthodontists throughout the country. And a lot of people see and hear Chris quite a bit. He's been on the speaking circuit for a long time. Shannon Patterson, my partner, does a lot of that now and has done a great job and is out in the community speaking. I have always been in the office behind the desk, really dealing with a lot of the transactions and the technical stuff that we do. And so my background is a long time ago. I used to be a CPA in former life. I was in the public accounting world in Ernst & Young and KPMG, but have now been doing this for right at 20 years, actually. 2004 was when Chris and I really got together and have been together since then. And so, yes, we do valuations for orthodontists wanting to sell their businesses. We help with setting up partnerships and sale transactions. We actually represent buyers and sellers in those transactions, or owners and candidates in those transactions. We also do recruiting. So we help orthodontists find associates or partners for their business or buyers for their business. And we actually do a lot of just education for the younger doctors, helping them get started or find opportunities. And we also do a lot of DSO, OSO consulting and advisory services for doctors that are looking to sell to DSOs, which is becoming more and more prevalent. So,
yes, I love what you guys do. And you guys are such a huge help to me a lot of times and my clients. And I always have appreciated being able to, if I don't know an answer or if I've got a doc that is needing some help, you guys are literally an email or a phone call away, and I know they're in good hands. So I appreciate that you guys started in this space and have really just done an excellent job helping new doctors and doctors that are transitioning out and new doctors coming in, just really being there for everybody.
Well, thank you for saying that. And a lot of our time is spent just on the phone, not with paying clients a lot of times, right? Just talking and seeing how we can help in any way, whether it's consultants or with doctors, sellers, or buyers. So yeah, we're happy to help however we can.
Yeah. One of the reasons that I wanted you specifically on the show today was I really want to pick your brain about all things partnerships and associates and acquisitions, and just dive in, because as our and my audience is younger doctors a lot of times. And I feel like this is an area where there is just not a lot of information out there, or good information. I think that a lot of times my doctors will use the chat groups as, oh, somebody said it in the group, so therefore it must be right.
Yes.
And I think you and I could both agree that a lot of times it couldn't be farther from the truth.
We have a lot of clients that do that, right? They ask every single one of their friends and other advisors off the record, and it can be hard sifting through all the information, right?
Exactly. My goal for today is to maybe have you help some of my clients and the docs that are out there listening, just to maybe get through some of those, what's real, what's not real, what should you be paying attention to. So do you mind, maybe we'll start with partnerships and what those agreements look like and path to ownership, and I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, yeah. When we think about this, we do a lot of partnerships now. Probably 45% of our transactions are partnership deals. So we still do a lot of 100% sales, but partnerships are a big focus. And so when I think about what do people need to think about, I'll try to break it down maybe first of all with sellers and
Hmm.
then talk about buyers, what they need to think
Great.
about. And for the sellers, the first thing that we try to talk to them about or make sure they're aware of, whether they're going to sell their whole practice or do a partnership deal, is are you financially ready?
Mhm.
We are not financial planners, certified financial planners, or wealth management advisors to them. And when you're talking about selling your or getting rid of your golden goose here, or the goose that's laying the golden egg, you really got to make sure, are you ready to do this? And
Yes.
it's very surprising sometimes that doctors don't exactly know what they have saved in retirement, what they're spending, what they need to spend, or even how much debt they have outstanding. And so that's
Hmm.
really the first step for them is, can you afford this? And if you're going to do a partnership deal, are you ready to do this again financially? Because this is not, this is a personal business that you have, right? And so all the money that you're producing comes to you. It's not, we're not selling GM or anything where you bring somebody in as part of the budget. Whenever you bring an associate or a young doctor into your practice, that's a very big expense.
Hmm.
And can you afford to do this? Maybe you're closer to the end of your timeline. And so can you take that pay cut for the 5 year plan that you plan to do together? Or if you're a younger doctor and you want to do a partnership deal, is your practice growing enough that you can afford bringing in this doctor and eventually your practice grows enough that they can become an owner? And so those are two big questions that we think about. Then from the buyer's point of view, what I really focus on a lot of times with them is just, are you ready to buy a practice? Do you really want to own a practice? Do you know what it takes
Hmm.
to manage a practice? Okay. Because providing clinical services is one thing. You've been trained for that throughout your residency program. You've maybe worked in a practice. You've done a lot of orthodontic clinical work. But have you ever sold a case? Do you know what it takes to manage somebody or manage team members or
Yes.
manage an upset parent? Do you want to do all the marketing that practice entails now? There's so many choices about technology that you have to think about how you do want to market the practice. We've talked to some doctors that are really timid, and you think, okay, do you want to go out and do this, or would you be
Hmm.
better off waiting for a little while longer? So when you think about a buyer, if they're going to buy a large practice, it takes a lot just to maintain that practice, right? You're going to work really hard to maintain that practice.
Yes.
If you're going to buy a very small practice, you have to know that you can grow it. And
Hmm.
it takes a lot to grow a practice, right? And
Hmm.
so either way you cut it, you're going to have to spend a lot of time in the practice and know that you're dedicated to it. And a lot of times we see younger doctors that hear the selling doctor works 3 days a week. What they don't see is the 15 or 20 years that selling doctor took to get it to be on cruise control, or
Yes.
even what they're doing behind the scenes that you don't realize. We
Hmm.
actually had recently a doctor who was visiting one of our clients, and the selling doctor ended up having to go into the office that night because he had a computer issue. And the young doctor that was there with he and his wife they said, "Do you work like this all the time? This doesn't seem right. Am I going to have to do this?" And he says, "It's not that I want to. These are just things that have to be done,
Right.
right?" And
Right.
so those are things
Right.
you have to think about. It's a great profession, and you do have a lot of flexibility, but sometimes being an owner, business owner, period, can require those types of things. But the other thing, just from both sides, is we try to really tell people understand both parties' perspectives. Some people get so honed in on this is what it means to me and this is what I want out of the deal. There's two people involved in this, and you don't want either party to be so rigid that it hurts the trust or hurts the
Yeah.
relationship because you're taking over a practice that is largely built on goodwill and relationships. And so you want to understand how even you request something, how does that affect the other side or what they may think about it? And I'm not telling anybody to accept a bad deal, but I do think from the buyer's perspective, a lot of times, okay, if you disagree with the price by 30 grand over a long term period, does that really mean anything? And
Hmm.
again, I'm not telling anybody to overpay, but you do have to think about those things because at the end of the
Right.
day, whatever one party requests in their favor or for their benefit is usually a detriment to the other party, right? So whatever
Hmm.
you want, or more the more that you want is usually out of the other party's pocket. And so you do have to be aware of that just to make sure that you're maintaining this relationship so this transition and this partnership will go well.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And the thing that I see a lot is I have a lot of doctors that come to me that have been in partnership positions that have went south, not went the way they wanted, and they have just fallen apart. And I can't help but think that a lot of times it starts with that agreement and negotiation on the front end, and everybody being very clear with from pricing to buyout or buy in, how all of that works. And I'm wondering if you could talk maybe a little bit to that, because I think for both of us, we would both agree that if you can get into either purchasing a practice or a great partnership opportunity, in the long run, that really is, I think, the best thing that you can do. But it's finding that right opportunity where everybody stays safe, the buyer and the seller, and where that, I think of it as that trust factor is strong all the way through, because when you get to final partnership, it's like a marriage, right? You're like, you're committed and bound together for until death do you part.
And you can't easily write prenuptial agreements in these either. They don't just easily just go away and you got to separate. So
yes. So I'm wondering, could you speak to that a little bit about maybe what that docs from, because you're talking about there's give and take on both sides. But if you were a new doc looking at this path to partnership, what does that look like? Maybe what are some safe ranges that should be in? And then if you're an existing doctor that's saying, I think I might be ready to make a change here and bring somebody in, what are some things that they need to be thinking about so that, again, we get this good level of where everybody's happy or as close to happy as they can be?
Yeah. And so exactly what you're saying there is communication is the key from the front end. And again, let me maybe start with the seller side here is if you're going to bring in a partner, we tell people there's only a few reasons if you own a practice why you want to create a partnership. And we work with a lot of one doctor practices that are creating partnerships. Okay. We also do a lot of two doctor practices that become three doctor practice. But in either of those cases, you're adding a partner, right? It's not like a two doctor practice. One of them is leaving and somebody will replace them. That's a sort of a different scenario here. But if you're talking about adding a partner to your practice, the only few reasons or a couple of reasons you really do that is your practice is already growing so much that you need help and assistance, right? Yep. And you want that long-term equity partner that has the same goals and visions with you. You don't have this revolving door of associates that are coming into your practice and leaving because they don't see a future here.
Right.
So that's one thing. And so if you have that situation, are you growing or do you have the capability to grow to allow for that new doctor to create more and more income? Okay. We have some doctors that are not willing to give up their income. Like, hey, I make $1 million and I want to keep making $1 million. So you have to figure out how can that work. We have other young doctors sometimes that say, listen, I'm making more money than I ever dreamed of. And I've been working way too hard for the past 2 years. And so I'm ready to take that pay cut and to create this and continue to grow. And so that's one thing that sellers need to be aware of. The other reason that doctors create partnerships may be for a transition plan, where you have a doctor that is 57, 58, 60 years old. They only want to work for maybe 5 more years. So they allow a new doctor to come in, they become partners for some period of time, and then they leave. And they understand, I'm really trading money for time here and setting up the plan that I want to do this. Okay. So that's one thing to be aware of for the sellers. Now, thinking about from the buyer side, what I try to stress with buyers for partnership deals is don't think you're going to come in and be partners or immediately equal. Okay. We have so many situations where doctors think, hey, I've worked here for 6 months or I've got a lot of experience. I should come in and be a 50-50 partner with this doctor. That's just not the case. Okay. They're almost always where they're going to be an associate for some period of time. They incrementally buy into the practice over some number of years, and they eventually become 50-50 or equal with that incumbent or owner doctor. And the reason for that is because you have to have this plan for the growth to allow for the growth. Okay. So that's one thing I tell buyers just to be aware of. Now, you may have the very rare situation, which we've had them before, where maybe you have a doctor, again, that's older, they want to slow down, and maybe they sell they do a 50-50 deal quickly or immediately, and that's more of a short-term deal. And part of the package may be, we're going to be 50-50, we're going to split everything 50-50, but you're working 180 days a year and I'm working 140. So those types of situations can happen. So I want the buyers to understand those. But again, these are all very specific plans that we create based upon what the doctor's trying to achieve. And the reality too is these are usually structured from the seller's side first because they own the practice. They're trying to create a plan that works for them. And it's more of, this is the plan I'm offering you to become a partner with me in my practice. And so we try to really structure it from the seller side first to create that plan and then make sure it looks good for the buyer so they're making more and more money over time and they have that pathway to become equal or whatever it may be. And so I do tell the buyers a lot of times, listen, this can be tweaked, but it's not like this is going to be completely changed, right? We've even had situations where we're representing buyers and they come to us and they say, the seller says they're not really sure what they want to do. Present us a plan. And we're like, we don't need to do that because all we're doing then is we could spend hours and hours to create some type of scenario that we think looks good. And then the seller comes back and says, that's not what I was thinking at all.
That's
So
at all.
yeah. Give us some guidelines here about really what the seller may be wanting to do. Maybe we could help with that, but the seller, the owner of the practice really has to have an idea of how they want to allow somebody to come into their business. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing with that is going back now to the communication piece of it. But a lot of times we tell everybody there's certain phases to these partnership plans. Okay. First of all, you want to make sure your partnership material. Okay. Can you be a partner? We have some sellers that aren't willing to give up control. And so we tell them you might not be the right candidate for partner. Keep doing what you're doing. And when you're close to retirement, let's find somebody. But you want to make sure your partnership material. The next piece is getting that valuation, putting a stake in the ground to understand what's happening in your practice. What is it worth? What would the terms be? And then there's a financial piece, which even though partnerships are not all about finances at all, there is one point that's only and purely financial. Okay. Can we create a plan with financial projections and illustrations to say, this is how it's going to work. Here's how you buy in. Here's how much you buy in. Here's how the profits are allocated. Here's how the debt is repaid. And can this work? And so we tell everybody, it doesn't matter how much you like each other. Okay. If you guys love each other, but we can't create a financial plan that both of you say, I'm good with that. And it doesn't mean we're jamming it down your throat to tell a buyer, you should love this. You should accept it because this is great. It's just illustrating and showing them, can this work for you guys? Does this fit into the plan that you want? Like sometimes we have buyers say, listen, I want to own my home practice. So if this seller is not ready to leave and retire after 5 years, I don't want to do this. And that's fine, right? That may mean the seller has to go find somebody else that wants to do a 10-year partnership. But through these communications and illustrating that, so once we get to the financial piece, then you get to the terms and legal documents and things like that. But by the time we finally get to legal documents, hopefully we have discussed enough and gone through these illustrations and explained why we're doing what we're doing, that everybody understands it, that you don't even look at the legal documents after this partnership starts because you already understand what was happening. We tell everybody the reason you pull out legal documents is because you have issues. And the legal documents remind you, oh, this is why we agreed to this. And if we can't mutually agree to anything else, this is what we have to stick to. I tell everybody, you can mutually agree to do whatever you want to do. Okay. And you can override your legal documents. But hopefully you've discussed it enough that you understand this is what the whole plan is. And you have in your head, this is what's going to happen and why we're doing it. I tell everybody, people forget what they agreed to 3 or 4 years down the road.
For sure.
And sometimes sellers forget, hey, I was paid a bunch of money for something, or buyers forget, oh, I feel like I'm here just as much as the senior doctor. Why am I not equal at this point? Okay, here are the legal documents that explain, and we all agreed to this. And it was a very normal thing to do, and we all had a rationale for doing it. Again, you guys can mutually agree, but otherwise, here's why it's outlined, and you pull out those documents to confirm or to, I guess, remedy questions that you may have.
Yes. Oh, such good information. And as you were talking through that, I'm thinking of some different scenarios that I've talked with doctors about and we've gone through. And I think you make a really good point. And I just want to bring this up as you were saying it, that part of what you are working on is agreeing to what's going to happen until that partnership comes to fruition. And I love that you said that you're evaluating on the front end and giving them a visual path of how this is going to work out and how this is going to look as you are moving towards that partnership coming together. And as you were talking about that, one of the things that I am wondering that if you would talk to, now we know that there isn't a cookie cutter approach to this. It's like a startup. There's no cookie cutter approach. Every practice is going to be a little bit different. Every partnership agreement is going to be a little bit different with the nuances of what everybody's looking for. But are there in your mind like some kind of things that are pretty standard that we should be looking for, like path to partnership shouldn't be more than 5 years. And again, we've got the outliers. You talked about somebody wants it, they don't want to retire for 10 years, but I would hope that they're partners by at least X amount of time in, or that we are evaluating the buy-in cost on the front end versus in 5 years, once that now we've had 2 doctors working to increase the value of the practice, and now the second doc is buying in at a very inflated price, but they've also been working towards it. So I'm wondering if you can talk to that a little bit, because I get questions about this all the time. I know that there's a lot of, I think, misconception on what you should be looking for. Again, knowing that there isn't a cookie cutter answer here, but are there some generals that you can speak to in regard to that?
Yes. And like you said, always caveat everything, right? But it depends. It depends. But I would say a general approach would be a doctor comes in, works as an associate for anywhere between 12 and even 36 months to be an associate in the practice, and then they start buying in incrementally. And usually we try to do, unless the practice is really significant and really profitable and by outlier, we usually have it to that once the buy-in starts, usually 5 years later, they become 50-50 and equal with the senior doctor. Okay. So that way you do have that runway. Now within that, sometimes you may have growth thresholds that says the only way we can do this, and even the way it works financially, is right now the practice is doing 2.5 million. We have to have a growth threshold that says in order for the buy-in to happen, it needs to hit 3.3 million, for example, because that way it makes it big enough that everybody's happy. And we have these questions sometimes, like with buyers say, well, can we just put a date in there that says, even if the growth threshold isn't hit, after 2 years, I get to buy in? And I say, well, we can put it in there, but remember, the reason we did this is we're trying to achieve this. So if we take that away, we're trying to set expectations that everybody understands what you're shooting for, right? And so if 2 years down the road, the practice is still doing 2.5 million, guess what? Even though we have this plan and everybody agreed to that, the seller may say, this hasn't grown. I'm not doing this. Either we can delay it or I may need to terminate you. So you're setting those expectations while you have that growth threshold in there for that reason. It made me think of something else you're thinking that you asked me about was, I guess, a general plan maybe. But I would say from the buyer's perspective is you have to understand too that you really want to act like an owner before you get the opportunity to be an owner, right? We have so many times that doctors say, I'm not getting paid much, or I'm not getting paid to be here more than 4 days a week. I say, if you want the opportunity to become a partner, you have to do that. It's not like you're an associate and then finally the owner says, okay, I want to make you a partner. And then you start doing more and you buy in. Okay, you have to prove that before you get there. And that's one of the reasons too, we do fix everything on the front end. We highly encourage our selling clients or our doctors who own practices to go ahead and create your plan. Have your practice valued, create the plan that you want to present to somebody so you understand it can work before you start talking to all these candidates and realize, oh, we've gone 4 or 5 months talking now and I realize this won't work for me. And so if you have the valuation done, you put that stake in the ground, and then you have this plan that what you want the buyer to achieve for this partnership to work. And then you don't have a buyer that's chasing this goal, that they know that the harder I work, the more and more the value goes up and the more the price changes. And so we do create the plan on the front end. We value it, and we can tell people we can update stuff. And maybe if you're a really young doctor, or maybe you just build a second location that you haven't, realized the investment on, we can value it now and maybe update that valuation in 2 years or do an average of the two or something. But we have to have a stake in the ground that you don't have this plan that the doctor's chasing, right? The harder I work, the more it's penalizing me. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So we do want to outline all those things. And again, that's why there's no standard approach. But if people understand why we're doing what we're doing and understand, these are the triggers, because usually what we do is set the price. And then from there, we're only increasing the price for investments made in the practice. Let's say they do grow out and build another location, and it costs $400,000 to build out the second location. That increases the buy-in price and the value. But we're not saying, okay, the practice grew by 30% in production this year, so we're increasing the value by 30%. That's really not fair to the buyer.
That's great. And again, thank you for going through that, because I feel like those are some of those misconceptions that are out there. And again, for anybody that's listening, this is not set in stone. I heard Doug and Jill talk about it. And so that means it must be. Every deal is going to be a little bit different, but it does give you some standards of what you should be looking for if you are thinking, hey, I've got an opportunity with a pathway to partnership. These are some things that I need to be thinking about. So as we kind of transition from partnerships into acquisitions, I call those my 8 years to retirement docs. Like, they're starting to think about it. They're getting ready for it. And you guys are helping the senior docs potentially get themselves ready to go, helping them through an evaluation so that we can bring our new from purchasing perspective in. Let's talk a little bit about that process. And I know when I'm consulting with doctors who are on that 8 years to retirement path, one of the things that I do a lot with some of my senior docs is saying, hey, we're going to work together for 3 years, and we're going to work really hard on getting your systems in place and getting your P&Ls, your profit going in the right direction, and just getting things cleaned up so that when we have an associate that's coming in to do an acquisition and going to purchase your practice, they aren't having to sift through all of that. And we're handing over this. Hopefully the senior doc is getting top dollar for their practice because they have been working to get it cleaned up. And then the new doc coming in is being able to come in and say, okay, for the most part, things are in order. And now I can focus on the transition that's going to happen in that year and then moving towards hopefully growing that practice. So would you mind talking a little bit about, because you guys do those evaluations, what are some of the things that you find that are important that really helps you guys value that practice, and things that maybe docs should be looking at, either from the doc that's looking to do an acquisition or the doc that's the seller, on some of those key things that they need to be paying attention to make this the best deal possible for everybody? By now, we all know I talk to a lot of doctors and give advice to practices in every stage of their life cycle. And one question my docs ask all the time is, who do you recommend for marketing to attract more new patients from the internet? My answer? Easy. I have been recommending Mary Kay Miller and her team at Kaleidoscope for the better part of a decade. Why? They are thorough, professional, and transparent. Kaleidoscope Digital Marketing is who you want to talk to, because they understand how to market in the orthodontic world, and they offer tools that are affordable and easy to use. I'm telling you, if you're looking to step up your digital presence, Kaleidoscope should be your first call. Go to contactkl.com to request your free digital marketing consultation. That's contactkl.com. We all know running and growing an orthodontic practice isn't easy, and technology is supposed to help you, but oftentimes your practice management software doesn't. Some of them are even clunky and need lots of third-party add-ons. That's why I recommend Greyfinch to my startup and existing clients, because Greyfinch is different. Greyfinch is an all-in-one web-based platform that saves you time and boosts your client base, productivity, and bottom line, with no downloads or third-party software needed. It even has tools you can't find anywhere else, like televisits, two-way email and text messaging, a patient self-service hub, and much more. Want to see how it can grow your practice? Visit greyfinch.com/Jill Allen and see why countless leading practices have made the switch.
Yeah, you brought up so many thoughts there, Jill. My mind was racing about what I would like to say, right? But so again, let me focus maybe on the seller first, and then try to talk about the buyer after that. And I think you said you classified them as your 8 year
8 years to retirement. Yeah, 8 years to retirement. Yeah.
Versus we get them when they may say, I want to sell my practice in 6 months. Can you help me with that? Or I've got somebody who's interested. Can we do this deal very quickly? And if we were to have lead time like that, we talked to them in 2 or 3 years, those are great. And so other than the things we already talked about, are they ready for retirement and things like that? Do they have enough money saved? The big thing we tell everybody is get your numbers in order, right?
Yes.
And the earlier you can do that, the better. And listen, we are transition advisors. Okay. We work with people selling practices and we handle the transaction for them. We are not practice management consultants. We leave that to you guys and others that are great out there that do that. And I encourage people to have someone like you help them with their numbers, because we are selling a business, not a hobby. And it is amazing how many people don't have a handle at all on their business. And sometimes when we first talk to them, we're like, what are you producing? I don't really know. I haven't looked at that in years. And most of them know those types of things. But when we start drilling down to the details, that buyers and their advisors and the banks will ask, how many new patient exams are you doing a year? How many starts do you do per year? What are your prepaid patients? What are your patients over estimated completion date? And you can probably take time with to talk about those more later on if you want to, Jill, all those things. But you really want to have those things cleaned up. And the reasons why is we do the valuation as of a specific date. So let's say right now we're doing valuations that says 12/31/2023. So we're saying, based upon all the information through the end of this year, this is where we think your practice is and what it's worth. Okay. The cleaner we have that data, the better. And how long it takes people to get that sometimes can take a long time. They always say, how long is it going to take to do evaluation? Well, it depends on how quickly you can get us everything, right?
Yeah.
But even once we get all that, which sometimes can be eye-opening for the seller, because they haven't looked in their AR report for years, and they realize, I've got $200,000 in over 90 days past due that I need to have cleaned up. But once you get all that information, the process doesn't stop. Let's say you're trying to find a candidate, and then we do the valuation as of the end of this year. You find a candidate in May of 2024. That candidate now gets the valuation. Plus, they want all the updated information since we did the valuation. Their advisors are going to ask for it after they first looked at it. Then their bank's going to start looking at it. So it's also a continuous process, right? And so we have had practices that don't have clean data, and instead of actually cleaning it up, they're doing like manual hand counts now. So now, whenever they're having to redo a manual hand count every 2 months, that's burdensome to them. And so you want to have your practice management system cleaned up so you can click a button and it spits out the report that you need that provides to the buyer. For one, it cleans up your practice. It makes it more efficient, everything else, whether this transaction happens or not, and what's going on in your practice. Two, you can get it to the buyer very quickly. We have had situations where that destroys the trust from the buyer and their advisor. Why is it taking 2 weeks to get an active patient report or an AR report? Well, it's because they're having to redo it every single time. And so you want to have those things available. You want the information to be accurate and given to them as quickly as possible. And also remember, you just from one of those low probability, high risk type things, also as the seller, you're providing reps and warranties that the data that you provided is accurate to the best of your knowledge. And so you want to make sure you're giving everything that is as accurate as it can be. Another example was a very clear example. We had one doctor that $1.5 million practice maybe, and we got their active patient report. And there was like 2,200 patients on there. We know that's not right, right?
Statuses are all messed up.
Statuses are not right. There's past due AR like crazy that this patient hasn't been in the practice in 3 years. And we told him, you need to clean that data up. Then it does take time to do that. It's not like you just go click a button and that patient disappears. And again, I don't know the ins and outs of it. But our client started telling us, we started looking at this and this is just going to take too long. And again, what I was trying to tell them is, okay, so what you're saying then is my data's not correct. This is a very hard process to clean up and I don't want to do it. So buyer, you can deal with it. And it's a hard process to deal with, right? But I still want top dollar for my practice. That doesn't work, right? You're selling a business. No. And so if you leave that liability or that stress on a buyer, then they may just walk away, right? Because there's so many different facets of this. We're not just selling widgets. We're not selling a home or a car. There's so many things that the buyer needs to understand. It's what type of treatment's being done? What type of patients are you seeing? Is it all adults? Is it all complicated surgical cases that I don't understand or I don't want to do? So is this a practice I want to purchase? And so having that information is a big deal. And not only that, you're also other people's lives involved, right? It's not just, you're taking on team members and you're taking on patients. And so there's a lot of questions that are asked. And that's one of the things that we're talking about, understanding each party's perspectives. Just from the seller's point of view, you have to understand that the buyer has a lot of questions to ask just to understand this practice. Again, we are not selling a car that you can go look on Kelley Blue Book value or look up a Carfax report. There's a lot of due diligence that goes into this. So those are things to think about. Get your data complete, clean up your estimated, clean up your patients that are over estimated completion date. Your buyer doesn't want to take on your problem clients, your problem patients, your problem cases. Be aware, from the seller's point of view, be aware of your contract balance. Do you accept a lot of prepaid patients? Now, I don't
Yes.
encourage people to change anything, right? But you have to understand, if you are taking a lot more prepayments, whatever that may be, maybe it's they are paying in full, maybe it's you're taking 50% down rather than normal 25, 30% down, or even lower that practices do, or you're just collecting your money quicker. We have some that say it's a 24-month treatment, but I want to make sure I don't have any payments left, so I do it over 18 months. Again, that just means that you have been prepaid on this and you've taken some equity out of the practice. I'm not saying change what you're doing. I'm just saying be aware that could negatively impact the value of your practice because you have pre-collected those funds. And so be aware of that. Again, I don't have a specific, there's ways we deal with it that can all vary, but just be aware of that. Then from the buyer's, go ahead. Sorry, Jill.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I can't agree with you more, because those are some of the things when I'm working with my docs that are looking at doing acquisitions. That's probably one of the first places we start is, what do receivables look like? What does production look like? And what's left in AR? And when you look at AR, which is what's left to be paid out, it speaks directly to what you're talking about. Have they had a lot of pay in fulls, or do they have a lot of delinquencies? And I always, say to my docs, okay, gosh, if we're looking at this AR number and 50% of it is 90 days past due, and a high amount of that is on insurance, and the other part is on patient accounts, the likelihood that you as a doc coming in that's purchasing is going to be able to collect that money is about none.
Yes, exactly.
And so when we're looking at, those are like all those really important thing. I also, and I don't know how much, I don't want to get too much on a tangent here, but this is what gets me all worked up for my docs when we're looking at this is, I'm also saying pay very close attention to credits that are left on the accounts, because I've had a couple docs that have purchased practices, and just for whatever reason, it wasn't advised that they pay attention to that. And as the new owner, guess who gets to pay back all those overpayments? When I had one doc that had over 150,000 in credits, that refunds that needed to be paid back. Now that's like an extreme situation, but I'm sure these are all the things that you guys are also looking at and helping to keep the doctors safe when they're working with you.
That's correct. And because we do try to look at that information, there's different ways we handle it. And like for the credits, for example, we say that is money that probably you should have never received or you should have refunded. So that should remain the seller's liability after the fact. Yes. Now, the problem is, are they aware of that? We try to make them very aware of that. And that's why it's great to have it cleaned up. We have some practices that every week they look at them and they're issuing refunds. You don't have that issue. You have some that is much higher. And that's been requests from the buyer's side before is, we want all of those refunded. If you don't have your data correct, what I tell them is, listen, we will put in the legal documents that the seller remains responsible for those refunds or credit balances if they're refunds. But sometimes we realize that they're not even really refundable. It's just they've had an accounting error. So we're not saying we're going to go refund all these monies, but you're aware that you're responsible for them. So you better go check them out to see if you actually owe the money or not. But so those are all the little nuance and details that can make them difficult. And just to be the cleaner your data, the better off you're going to be for so many different perspectives. While you're on your practice, when you're going through this transaction, after the closing, there's all types of reasons to keep it clean.
Yeah, this has been, again, I know that you and I could probably do 3 more episodes, 3 more hours, just diving into all this. And we have really been all over the board here. I'm curious if, you can, if there's any nuggets out there, whether it's acquisitions or partnerships or whatnot that we have not discussed, where you're like, Jill, if I could leave the audience with a few pearls, these are a few things that I absolutely think that we need to impart on them.
Let me think. Maybe touch on a couple here. Let me think, just thinking out loud, make sure I touch on non-competes. I want to think about that for buyers. People in the deal, I think we've talked about that quite a bit. And then just ownership overall, because I just think that's the best route to go in orthodontics with all the different options that are out there now. But
agreed.
One of the details I was going to say with buyers, if you're looking at buying a practice, non-competes. If you're going to go work for somebody, you're going to have a non-compete as an employee, and just be aware of that. There's a lot of the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, is actually coming down on those quite a bit, and they're talking about trying to abolish them. There's some states that don't enforce them anyway.
Yeah.
So if you're going to go join and practice as an associate, be aware of those, okay? Because say you're going back to your hometown, you want to be there. So you don't want to have a non-compete that is overly burdensome, or be aware you're probably going to be subject to a non-compete, but is it agreeable to you? Okay. If you're going to go live in California for 2 years and work there and then go back to your hometown eventually, maybe it doesn't matter to you as much. So be aware of those as an employee. And then if you're buying a practice and the seller is going to be subject to a non-compete, those can usually be more strenuous, or I guess usually like a non-compete for an associate doctor is 12 to 24 months. A non-compete for a selling doctor is 4 to 5 years usually. Mm-hmm. And that's because you're paying a lot of money for that. Those will probably always be there. It's probably highly unlikely that FTC ever abolishes those because you're paying for that consideration. And so as a buyer, be aware if the seller is really questioning that or trying to beat that non-compete up, saying, can I have a shorter one? Can I have a 5-mile non-compete? Why are you selling your practice?
Exactly.
We are pretty hardline on that with our sellers. If you start questioning this, then the buyer's going to say, why am I going to buy your practice, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to sell, you need to sell and be ready to give that up. So non-competes are a big deal. And then just the ownership piece overall, like you mentioned earlier in this podcast, to me, ownership is still the best route to go. I know there's a lot of DSO opportunities out there that we can make a lot of money. But if you just think I don't know what you think about this, Jill, but I think if you're a decent human being and you're involved a little bit in the community, you should be able to have $1 million practice, right?
For sure.
Okay.
Agree 100%.
Okay. And so if you have $1 million practice at normal 60% overhead, which maybe it should probably be a little bit less, that's $400,000 a year. Mm-hmm. And not only that, you have all these tax benefits you can do. You can have your kids on payroll. You can run your car allowances through. You can set up retirement plans that you can put $100,000 to $200,000 into your retirement plan. If you want to set those types of things up, all types of tax benefits, and you're building equity that even if you make $400,000 as an associate for 10 years, but you make $400,000 as an owner, guess what? Eventually, it's like owning a home. In 10 years, you can sell that asset for $800,000-900,000 or more, right? And so I do just want to stress to everybody that practice ownership is still the best way to go. Everybody's scared about the economy now, and I know we talk about that a lot. Everybody's talking about now the recession that may come up. I've only been doing this 20 years. There's people that have been doing this longer than me. We went through 08, which was very scary. We went through COVID, which we thought the world may end and everything was shut down. And guess what? Practices have done well, very well over the long term. And everything's cyclical. This may be a tough next 6 to 12 months coming up, but it's like the stock market. Over the long term, the stock market's average 10% a year. You have years that it's 20%, you have years that it's negative 12%. But overall, long term, that's the route to go. And I really stress to people is if you're the type of person who thinks you can do this again, do you want to own a practice? You're going to do very well. Do you have other opportunities out there? Yes, but you're building equity and you have all types of flexibility and you can do this. And so I think financially it's a great situation for everybody.
I could not agree with you more, which is why I love my startups. I love my acquisitions. I love them all, but I could not agree more. And I was actually just at a retreat with Gage, and Ryan was talking about just showing us the data for our ortho industry. And it's so easy to get caught in the sky is falling, falling. And if you just, like you said, look at it like an investment portfolio, this is an investment into your future. And if you look at it over the long haul, you will have come out on top. Now, will there be years where it's a little leaner and you have to tighten up your belt a little bit and maybe take it easy? Absolutely. But that's life. We're going to go through that at any point along the way. I love to hear you say that as well, but I always tell my docs, invest in yourself. You are the best bet. An OSO, a DSO, I had so many of my docs that were really leaning into the associateships, making really good money. And the minute something bad happened, who's the first person to go?
Yes.
Our high-paying doctors. And so invest in yourself. You guys can do this. And I love that you said that. I agree with you. Whether it's a partnership, whether it's an acquisition, it's a startup, for the most part, everybody out there can do it.
Yes, and that reminds me too, Jill. I had this written down that I want to talk about is hiring practice management consultants. Because like I was saying earlier, if you're a buyer, there's so many decisions out there. What practice management system are you use? What type of marketing are you going to do? And what we've always seen are the practices that engage practice management consultants. And there's plenty out there, right?
Yep,
they
absolutely
always perform so well. And Sometimes it's not, because a lot of us know what we need to do, right? It's just a matter of somebody holding us accountable. And when you're the owner of the practice, nobody's holding you accountable, but you're holding everybody else accountable. But having that type of advisory services and practice management consultants in your practice to help you with the areas that you need help on, maybe you're not the best marketer. Well, there's plenty of marketing companies out there that can help you with that process. And so I encourage people, if you're going to want to practice, take advantage of the advice of the professionals that are out there to help you manage and operate your practice and make it the best.
Yeah. Sage advice. And I agree with you, not only because that is something that I do, but I always look at it like, if you want to get in good shape at the gym, your best chance at getting in shape is hiring a personal trainer. We see this over and over again, and take it outside of our industry, anywhere else. If you really want to achieve your goal, your best chance at getting there the quickest is leaning on other people's expertise. So as we wrap up, this has been just fabulous. I just appreciate all of your knowledge. And if somebody is saying, you know what, I'm ready to take that step, how do they get a hold of you? What's the best way to reach out, whether it's from partnership or just finding out what practices do you have available for that you guys are listing or whatnot? Can you speak to that?
Yes. So the easiest way probably is our website, which we're trying to update right now, which is BentsonCopple.com. You can always call our office anytime, 800-621-4664, or our email addresses are all the same. It's either Chris@BentsonCopple.com, Shannon@BentsonCopple.com, Doug@BentsonCopple.com. Any way you can reach out to us, but website, telephone, or email is great.
Perfect. All right. If you don't know this, you probably do. I like to finish everything up. Okay. With the speed round. Are you ready for the speed round?
I think so. I hope so.
All right, here we go. Describe your style, one word.
Oh, realistic. I always try to tell everybody, you got to be realistic about what we're doing. I'm not negative. I'm realistic.
That's good. That's a good one. I should use that more. What are you listening to or watching?
Gosh, I have kids, and so I'm usually doing something until 10:15. So I don't watch or listen to anything of any real substance other than I like to listen to a lot of investing stuff. And I usually listen to that through podcasts or quick articles, which my family really gives me a hard time because everything I listen to online or podcast, I put it at 1.5 speed so I can get through it very quickly. So I usually do a lot of investing background stuff.
Awesome. That's wonderful. Anything you do just for you?
Gosh, my family and I, we have a boat. We have a lake just 15 minutes north of us. So I love going to the lake, whether it's with the family or by myself. I love being on the water. Yeah.
That's like me in the mountains. I just need to be in the mountains and I'm in my happy spot. Any hidden talents that you'd want to share?
I actually used to do a lot of artwork. And I know that's really weird because you have accounting and art. And people think that seems crazy. I almost majored in art when I was in college. I got accepted into an advanced art thing. But I will say, going back to all that, I do realistic art. I usually, if I'm drawing, it's either realistic buildings or faces or people. So I don't do any abstract art. But I used to do a lot of artwork.
That is wonderful. That's a talent I've always wanted. I can make a stick man not look good. And our last question, what's your big, hairy, audacious goal that you may want to share?
Oh, gosh. Mainly that my wife and I would love to live on the water on the lake somewhere. And so that's probably the biggest one is we don't have one near us that we could do, but I'd love to live on the lake and then be near the water all times eventually.
That's it. Eventually, you will get there. Doug, it's been just an absolute pleasure having you on Hey Docs.
Yeah, hey, it's been an honor and a pleasure and a whole lot of fun to be here. Thank you so much, Jill.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Until next time.